Recently I've been feeling tired all the time, so I downloaded one of those apps that supposedly tracks your sleep schedule. The app automatically records audio if you snore or if you're turning over in your bed, that sort of thing. It's pretty smart. It has automatic detection of those kind of noises that you're making. I set it up and slept with it a few nights. Yesterday, I looked through the audio files and began listening to see if there was something I could change to get a better night's sleep. The first few recordings were exactly what you'd expect. A few sounds of me turning over in my bed, the occasional snore and the occasional groan or mutter. It was only the last few nights that began to be strange. There were a few recordings labelled sleep talking, and each recording had a small transcription button below the recording. Apparently the app ran the recordings through some kind of speech-to-text generator. I opened the transcript and found the following message: unable to transcribe sleep talking. I tapped the playback and listened closely. Instead of the normal grunts or single words I sometimes said, there was just a strange wet sucking sound. So I put in my earbuds and turned up the volume. It honestly reminded me of a sound that a person would make when they take a deep breath through their nose, or while smelling fresh bread or cookies, but somehow wetter. It didn't sound like something I was capable of producing. The playback said that it had been taken at around 2:33 a.m. The following 2 nights also had recordings with the same sleep talking titles. Each of them had also been taken at 2:33 a.m. I listened to both of them and heard the same wet slurping sound. At this point I was a little more than freaked out. I live alone and couldn't think of even a moderately likely explanation for what I'd recorded. I decided to stay up to get to the bottom of the noise. If my air vents or phone were making that noise at 2:33 a.m. each night, I wanted to be awake for it. I lay in bed watching YouTube videos until around 2:15 a.m. and set my phone down to wait for the last little bit in the darkness. Laying in my bed in the pitch black was extremely unnerving. I had the overpowering sensation that something was watching me, though I told myself that I'd be feeling that regardless of what was actually happening. I stared at the ceiling and told myself that surely 2:33 had already passed. Surely I was laying in the dark around 2:40 and being ridiculous. Then my door opened. I froze, and something moved into my room. It made the same wet breathing sound I heard before. I immediately began coughing and rolled over in my bed, hoping whatever it would be would leave. It moved backwards out of my door. I lay there for a few moments, trying to convince myself that I made up whatever I heard. Then I turned to look at my bedroom door, the door that I always kept shut whilst I was asleep. It was hanging wide open. I swung my legs out, grabbed a baseball bat from under my bed in my right hand, and held out my phone's camera in my left. And I turned out my bedroom light before beginning to walk through my house. I walked through the hallway to my kitchen, flipped on the light, and froze. A black figure sat halfway obscured inside my laundry room. It had skin so black it was almost invisible, but its one white eye was staring at me. I took a picture with my phone as I scrambled back to my room, and slammed the door shut, called the police, and tried not to hyperventilate whilst I waited for them to arrive. They're searching my house right now, but they still haven't found evidence of anything. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, but it won't be here. I checked my phone and almost lost it when I saw the picture I took of this thing. She was living in apartment 3B. I was in 4B. Or at least she was supposed to be living in 3B. Our building is small, only 6 apartments, so when a new person moves in, it's a slightly bigger deal. I went to her door the day she moved in, all prepared with a winning smile and a batch of cookies. Everyone else in the building was older, so I was excited to have someone else my age to possibly connect with. My social life back then was pitiful, and I was eager to meet someone new. As I approached the door marked 3B, I noticed something odd. It was only mid-October, but I could feel a warmth radiating from underneath the door. Like she already had the heating cranked way up. The warmth seeped out towards my shoes, and I wondered just how hot it was in that room. I didn't have to wait long to find out. After just a few moments, the door opened abruptly, and a girl poked her face out. Well, I say girl because she looked about my age, around 25, but her face also had an ageless quality, where if someone tried to convince me that she was either 15 or 47, I would have believed it. I offered her the cookies, told her I was in the apartment just above hers, and trailed off as she stared at me with her large eyes. Once I was silent, she smiled, although it looked like she was purposely trying to keep her lips closed in the smile. Having had horrendous teeth and then braces in my early life, I can understand the fear of showing crooked teeth, but there was something odd about that smile. Without a word, the girl reached out one arm and took the cookies and set them on the shelf inside the door. I didn't know much sign language at the time, but I recognised the gesture of thank you, or of what she made it. I realised that she might have been deaf or mute, and I gave her another awkward smile as she closed the door immediately, leaving me in the hallway with the warm air still brushing at my ankles. I tried to learn some sign language in the next few weeks, and I surprised myself at how easy it was to remember. I didn't know I had a knack for languages because I had never really tried, but something about the physicality of the hand movements made it easier to remember somehow. I thought it would impress my neighbour if she saw that I'd learned how to hold a basic conversation, but unfortunately I didn't even see her around the building at the time. I never ran into her in the laundry room or walked in on the studying roof space, but every time I would pass room 3B, on the way up to the stairs, I would again feel the blistering heat pouring out from under the door. Eventually I found out that the girl wasn't in fact living in the apartment 3B. And that all started when I had to phone call the plumber in to fix the shower. The pipes had been making an ungodly grating noise for a few days, and it was starting to give me a headache whenever I showered, so I called someone in to fix it. I stayed in the living room as he worked, and was very surprised when the plumber came out to tell me nothing was wrong with the pipes. They were in perfect condition, and there was nothing that could have been causing any sort of noise out of the ordinary. Of course, him saying that didn't fix the issue. The noise seemed to lay low for a few days, and then it was back again, louder than ever. And of course, to add to the chaos, the light over my shower started blinking and spluttering whenever it was on. It wasn't even enough to change the bulb. The light still worked. It was just enough to make showering even more irritating. One day in particular, the last day I lived in apartment 4B, I finally dredged up the motivation to take another torturous shower. The grumbling of the pipes started as usual, and the light flickered faintly. But eventually I noticed that the grumbling was turning into a shrieking. And I was just thinking that it was a wonder that the water was even still flowing when the shower stream itself started to shudder and spurt. I looked up at the shower head, and in the flickering light, the water seemed darker than it usually was, sort of an orangish red. I thought the pipes might start to be dangerously rusty at all, but no. The metallic iron smell was too strong for the water just to be rusty. It was blood. A shower of blood was coating me in the sickly fluorescent light. I screamed and stabbed to open the shower door when I noticed something else. Something worse. Above the towel rack, and the little shelf I had, there was a vent. Now that it was approaching winter, I had opened it fully to let some heating spread around the apartment. As I stumbled out of the shower, soaked in blood and still screaming, I saw her. The girl who was supposed to be in 3B. She was not in 3B. She was crouched in the duct behind the metal grate, with those same wide eyes peering out at me. Her body was contorted impossibly to fit in the tiny space, and her head craned at such a twisted angle that I whimpered in fear. Her mouth was open now, and I could see why she'd kept it closed before. She had far too many teeth layered and crammed into her mouth like a shark. I stared, frozen as she wrenched her long arm from where it was stuck in the metal duct and formed it into a claw, dragging it down her body in the sign language gesture for the word hungry. Before I could scream again, the light bulb finally burst, plunging me into complete darkness. I don't remember how I got out of there. The other neighbours must have heard my screams and seen my blood-covered body sprint outside in the snowy November evening. The next thing I remembered, I was being hoisted into an ambulance. I was still too much in shock to be embarrassed about being found completely naked. I never stepped foot into that building again, and I never found out what happened to the girl in 3B, or the mysterious heat coming from under her door. The only thing I know is that as I was being driven away in the ambulance, I saw several people in hazmat suits making their way up to the 3rd floor. My grandma and grandpa have 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy. Michael, Leslie and my mum Jessica. My mum being the youngest and Michael being the oldest. My mum was just 1 when they moved into the house. The house looks small, but it's a lot bigger on the inside. 2 stories and a basement. My mum's sister and brother's room were upstairs, and her room was downstairs across from my grandma and grandpa's room. Now my mum's old room is a TV room, but the room upstairs still remain and are empty. Now that you have a backstory, hopefully you can visualise the stories a bit better. Now bear with me, because this might get just a little bit complicated. I've lived in my grandma's house since I was little, and throughout my life things have happened. And I've never pieced it together until something terrifying happened. But let's rewind a bit. Let's start with my grandma. My grandma has had crazy experiences in the house. She used to tell me about how she could hear people walking upstairs and things banging around. It wasn't bad at first, but after a whole month of living there, things started changing. My grandma used to be home alone a lot watching TV while my grandpa was at work. While she was watching TV, she would lock up the house, including the door to the basement, but she would leave the key in the basement door. And one time, whilst watching TV, the key popped out of the door. And after that happened, my grandma grabbed her keys and left the house. And about 3 hours later, when my grandpa came home, they checked the house and the basement, but no sign of a break-in, no windows broken, no doors unlocked, not even a single sign of forced entry. And ever since then, things got worse. My grandma used to have sleep paralysis. She used to see a man standing in the doorway staring at her for hours. This happened frequently for a while, and then it calmed down. Everyone knew there was something odd about the house, but just a feeling, nothing more. Now I'm going to tell you about the lady in white. My mum's sister and brother used to see a woman walking along the halls of the upstairs. The upstairs has 1 long hallway with 1 door on each end. The lady walked up and down that long hallway, and that's all I was told about the lady. After my mum's brother and sister moved out, my mum moved upstairs into the biggest room, My nursery was in a small room across the hall. When I was about 2 or 3, I slept in my mum's room because I was scared of the dark. In my opinion, I don't believe there is a woman upstairs. The only time something happened upstairs was when I was sleeping next to my mum on the futon while she was on the bed. And I had my covers overhead like every kid does when they are scared. I could hear footsteps running around the room over and over again. Finally, I got the courage to throw the covers off my head, and there was no one next there except for me and my mum, who was still sleeping. It was quiet, and I didn't hear the footsteps around the room anymore. I got up and crawled in bed with my mum again and fell asleep. The next morning I told my mum about it, but she told me it was in my imagination. Maybe it was, but if it wasn't, then what was it? I've never really had anything else happen to me, at least nothing that I can remember, except for one thing that happened when I was in the 5th grade, and I will never forget it. My parents were going to trivia night with one of my mum's friends. My grandparents were babysitting me. Nothing happened throughout the time that I was there, until after I fell asleep. I was sleeping in my mum's old room, which was turned into a TV room. I remember waking up out of nowhere. It wasn't even like a slowly waking up thing. I shot up awake, like you would after a nightmare. But I didn't have a nightmare. If I had a nightmare, I would remember it, if it scared me that bad to wake me up the way it did. I don't exactly know why, but I had a feeling to turn around, so I did. I turned to look at my grandpa's room, and I saw a man. And it wasn't my grandpa because the man was really tall. He was almost as tall as the doorway itself. And it was just a shadow. No facial features, just a shadow. I didn't have to get a good look at him because I just glanced at him and turned back around and went to sleep. I didn't acknowledge what I saw until the next morning after I really thought about it. After that, I knew what my grandma was seeing in sleep paralysis. Whatever it is has been living in their house for years. These stories that I've told you are completely real and are not fictitious, so please be respectful. Ever since I can remember, a monster has been hidden in my room. When I was very young, I'd cried to Mum before she put me to bed and begged her to let me sleep on the couch or in her bed. "Hush," she'd say, sweeping back my hair and staring down at me with her intense green eyes. "You just have a very active imagination. Sleep." Despite myself, I would sleep, at least for a few hours. Then my eyes would fly open and it was there. A haggard-looking figure, an old woman my mind settled on early, staring me down from the shadows. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. All I could do was wait for the sun to come up and my eyes to fall close again. As I got older, I learned that what I had was sleep paralysis, and a relatively common phenomena. Here in the West, we often see a demon or a witch. Islamic countries may describe their visitor as jinn, and other cultures connect sleep paralysis with visiting ghosts of departed loved ones. The universal consensus, however, is that it's your brain playing tricks on you. Simply a half-awakening nightmare with the added bonus of hallucinations. This added knowledge didn't make it any less terrifying. When I was 16, we moved across country to realise Mum's dream of running a homestead. This new house was huge but cold with exposed brick, walls and concrete floors. I was allowed to decorate my room as I wanted to, settled on splayed rugs and hanging macrame. I like to think of myself as a bit of a hippie, even if I was afraid to get my hands dirty. The rest of the room consisted of my bed, desk, dresser, and a rocking chair Mum salvaged from the local tip. Bare and cheap, but very much mine. The figure appeared on the first night. It always started the same way. A tingling in my fingers and toes, a heavy weight on my chest, and then I would look into the corner and there she would be, breathing slow but deeply. I could see her chest rise and fall, could hear her vibrating throat. I couldn't see her face under the mountain of stringy hair, and for that I was grateful. Sleep paralysis stayed with me through university dorms, a house with roommates, and then when I finally got my own shitty studio apartment. The layout was surprisingly similar to my room and the homestead, and I kind of loved it, a reminiscence of sorts. Then came the night I stayed over at Carly's house. We met at work, like all good love stories. Me, a receptionist, her, a paralegal, in a tight pencil skirt and rose red lips. After only a few weeks, she asked me out for drinks, and we stumbled back to her house, drunk on cheap shots and high on each other. After a fantastic few hours, we both fell asleep in a tangled heap of sweaty limbs. Then it started. The tingles, the pressure, the all-encompassing sense of dread. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to will it away. Not here. Not today. Meow. My eyes fly open. The cat. Enough light filters through the sheer shadow curtains. I can see it's ginger and large, almost more the size of a small dog, and its haunch down, eyes huge as it stares at me from the corner. The figure is there, the cat pounces. It's like time stalls, and as usual I can't move. Now the cat is suspended in animation, dangling on an invisible string from the ceiling. It would be hilariously absurd if I wasn't so fucking terrified. Then the thing moves. Past the paralysed cat, over the pile of clothes, thrown haphazardly onto the floor. She begins to crawl towards the bed. All the while I'm trapped in my own silent body and scared fucking shitless. She scuttles over Carly, who doesn't even stir. I can hear a rasping voice in this thing's throat. Unnatural and maybe even inhuman. The cat is still frozen. The world is frozen. She's up against me. She reaches up with the decrepit grey fingers and parts her hair. All I see are black holes where their eyes should be, and also with the nose and mouth. One day, it says. The voice is a strange metallic twang, seeming to echo and pulse through my head. You will join us.